Clients don't want to see someone who shops at thrift stores. You re-talented but not presentable, my boss Veronica whispered to me minutes before a major client meeting, her manicured hand pressing against my shoulder as she guided me away from the showroom. Your designs are exquisite, truly, but your appearance undermines the brand's image. Stay in the backroom today. Actually, stay in the backroom always, it's better for everyone. I nodded silently and retreated to the cramped workspace behind the velvet curtain where I'd spent 2 years creating the designs that bore her name, watching through a gap in the fabric as she presented my work as her own. But why did I keep nodding, keep creating, keep hiding, and why, when Vogue's editor called the showroom 6 months later asking for the genius behind the collection, did my boss drop her champagne glass on the marble floor? There she is, the designer we've been profiling. The photographer from Vogue lowered her camera, pointing directly at me as I emerged from behind the curtain. We met at the textile exhibition in Soho. You probably don't remember, you were examining the Japanese silk weaves so intensely you didn't notice anyone around you. But I remembered your face when I saw your early sketches in the Fashion Institute archives. She smiled. The sketches that match every Veronica Laurent original from the past 2 years. Veronica's champagne glass shattered on the floor. Her face went white. And I finally stopped nodding. The arrangement had started with desperation. I'd graduated from the Fashion Institute of Technology with honors, a portfolio full of innovative designs, and $87,000 in student debt. The fashion industry was brutal to newcomers, especially newcomers who couldn't afford the unpaid internships, industry events, and designer wardrobes that signaled belonging. Veronica Laurent had offered me a job that seemed like salvation. I need a technical designer. Someone who can execute my vision with precision. She'd reviewed my portfolio with barely concealed interest. You have extraordinary skills. The problem is your presentation. My clients expect a certain aesthetic from everyone in the showroom. I can dress differently. It's not just clothes. It's bearing, background, the intangible qualities that come from growing up in certain environments. She'd smiled with what I'd mistaken for sympathy. But I can work around that. You'll handle the backroom work, the actual construction, the technical drawings, the problem solving. I'll handle the clients. The salary was twice what other entry-level positions offered. I needed to pay rent. I needed to eat. I needed to start somewhere. I said yes. The reality of the arrangement revealed itself slowly. At first, I believed I was genuinely executing Veronica's designs. She'd give me mood boards, vague descriptions, references to other designers' work. Something like this, but more structural. Elegant but edgy. Think Balenciaga meets old Hollywood. I'd translate these fragments into actual designs, solving the technical challenges, developing the patterns, creating the pieces that would eventually appear in her showroom. But gradually, I realized, the fragments were all she contributed. The actual design work, the creative problem solving, the innovative techniques, the signature elements that made Veronica Laurent originals distinctive, all of that came from me. She was taking credit for my creativity, not just my technical skills. The backroom became my invisible prison. Veronica had keys to my workspace, but I wasn't allowed keys to the showroom. Client meetings happened on the other side of the velvet curtain, and I learned to work silently so they wouldn't hear the sewing machines or wonder who was back there. You're talented but not presentable. She said versions of this regularly, as if repetition would make it true, or make me believe it deeply enough that I'd never question the arrangement. Your work is brilliant, but your presence would confuse the brand message. Clients want to meet the designer, but they expect someone who looks the part. I'm protecting you, really. The fashion world can be cruel to people who don't fit the image. I absorbed these statements like poison, slowly believing that my thrift store clothes and working-class background made me unsuitable for the world my designs inhabited. The exploitation escalated with success. The Veronica Laurent original line gained attention. Buyers from major department stores placed orders. Fashion bloggers praised the innovative construction techniques. A minor celebrity wore one of my designs, credited to Veronica, to a film premiere. As the line grew, so did my workload and my invisibility. We need 20 pieces for Fashion Week, Veronica would announce. I'll handle the presentations. You handle everything else. Everything else meant design, pattern making, construction, fitting, finishing. 16-hour days in the backroom while Veronica attended parties, gave interviews, and built a reputation on work that wasn't hers. My salary increased modestly. Her profile increased exponentially. The breaking point came at a fabric exhibition in Soho. I'd slipped out during my lunch break, something I rarely did, since Veronica preferred I remain invisible at all times. But a Japanese textile company was showcasing silk weaves I'd read about for years, techniques that could transform the structural work I was doing. I'd spent an hour examining the fabrics, asking questions of the representatives, discussing potential applications with an intensity one rarely allowed myself. Fashion was my passion, not just my job, and for 1 hour I let myself engage with it publicly. I hadn't noticed the photographer watching me. I hadn't known she was from Vogue, working on a feature about emerging textile techniques. I hadn't realized she'd photographed me, researched me, and discovered the truth I'd spent 2 years hiding. The Vogue call came 6 months after the exhibition. We're doing a feature on innovative designers who are transforming structural fashion. Your work with Japanese silk weaving techniques caught our attention. The editor's voice was warm, professional. We'd like to profile you for our emerging talent section. The call came to the showroom's main line. Veronica's assistant answered. There must be some mistake, the assistant said, confused. Ms. Laurent is our designer. We don't have anyone named Vivian Morrison on staff. Check your backroom, the editor suggested dryly. Ms. Morrison's sketches match your entire collection. We've done our research. Veronica tried to intercept the situation. The Vogue editor is confused, she told me, rushing into the backroom with uncharacteristic urgency. Someone gave them wrong information. I need you to stay back here while I sort this out. What wrong information? They think you designed the collection. Obviously, you're my technical assistant. I create the concepts, you execute them. That's not what happens. I create the concepts. I execute them. You present them. Veronica's expression flickered, surprised that I was finally pushing back, calculation about how to handle it. Vivian, we have an arrangement. It's worked well for both of us. You have a steady job, good salary, no pressure to be public-facing. Why would you want to change that? Because you're taking credit for my work. You've built your entire reputation on designs I created. I elevated your designs. Without my marketing, my connections, my brand, your work would be sitting in a student portfolio, unseen. She straightened her designer jacket. You should be grateful. I should be credited. The Vogue team arrived the next morning. The editor, the photographer who'd noticed me at the exhibition, and an assistant carrying equipment. They'd come expecting to profile an emerging designer. They'd come with evidence already gathered. We've traced the evolution of your design signature through public records, the editor explained to me, ignoring Veronica's attempts to redirect the conversation. Your student work at FIT. Your early sketches in the Fashion Institute archives. The progression is clear, the structural techniques, the draping innovations, the textile experimentation. It's all you. She's my employee, Veronica started. She's your ghost designer. That's different. The editor turned to me. Would you be willing to speak on the record about your working arrangement here? Veronica's face went pale. If she says anything defamatory, I'll sue. Truth is a defense against defamation. The editor smiled thinly. And we have documentation. Sketches, pattern records, fabric orders. The paper trail shows exactly who creates the Veronica Laurent originals. I looked at Veronica, the woman who'd hired me with promises of opportunity, hidden me with excuses about presentation, and built her reputation on my invisible labor. Then I looked at the Vogue team, the chance to finally be seen, credited, recognized for work I'd created. Yes, I said. I'll speak on the record. The interview lasted 4 hours. I explained everything, the arrangement, the backroom, the invisible labor. The dismissive comments about my appearance. The systematic erasure of my creative contribution. Clients don't want to see someone who shops at thrift stores. You're talented but not presentable. Stay in the backroom. It's better for everyone. I repeated Veronica's words exactly, because exact words matter in documenting abuse. The photographer took pictures of my workspace, my sketches, the contrast between the cramped backroom and the luxurious showroom. The visual documentation was devastating. Veronica watched from across the room, powerless to stop what was happening. Her attorney's number was probably already dialed, but there was nothing illegal about Vogue investigating the truth about who designed her collection. The article appeared 6 weeks later. The Ghost Designer, Inside Fashion's Hidden Labor Crisis. The piece profiled not just me but the industry-wide practice of established designers taking credit for employees' creative work. I was the central example, but others came forward after the story broke, assistants, junior designers, pattern makers who'd seen their innovations credited to famous names. The response was immediate and polarizing. Some defended Veronica, arguing that branding and marketing were as valuable as design itself. Others condemned her, recognizing the exploitation for what it was. Social media debates raged about credit, compensation, and the invisible workers behind famous fashion houses. But for me, the response that mattered was simpler: people finally knew my name. The professional consequences unfolded over months. Veronica lost major accounts, buyers who didn't want the negative association, clients who felt deceived about who'd created their custom pieces. Her brand, built on a fiction, crumbled when the fiction was exposed. She tried to sue me for breach of confidentiality, but my employment contract had been carefully designed to protect her interests, not mine. It specified nothing about silence regarding creative credit. She tried to claim partial ownership of designs I'd created, but the paper trail the Vogue team had gathered proved my independent creative development. She tried to rehabilitate her image with interviews claiming collaborative misunderstandings, but the backroom photographs, my detailed sketches, and the timeline of my work versus her involvement told a different story. I launched my own line 18 months after the Vogue article. Investors who'd read about my story reached out, offering funding for independent development. Buyers who'd admired the Veronica originals wanted to carry pieces from the actual designer. The Fashion Institute, embarrassed by the exploitation of their graduate, provided workspace and mentorship. The collection debuted at a small showing during New York Fashion Week. I designed the pieces. I constructed many of them personally. I stood in front of the audience and presented work that bore my name. For the first time in 4 years, my creative work was connected to my face, my voice, my identity. The industry response was overwhelming. The same structural innovations, the same textile experimentation, the same design philosophy, but now attributed to the person who'd actually developed them. Critics praised the collection, recognizing the signature elements they'd admired in the Laurent line now properly credited. Orders exceeded my small operations capacity. I hired assistants, paying them fairly, crediting their contributions, treating them like the professionals they were. The contrast to my experience with Veronica was deliberate. I knew what exploitation looked like, and I refused to perpetuate it. Veronica attempted contact once, 18 months after our professional separation. "I hear your line is doing well," she said, her voice carrying forced casualness. "I always knew you had talent. You knew I had talent you could steal. I gave you a platform. You gave me a backroom. You gave me invisibility. You gave me the message that my appearance made me unsuitable for my own success." I paused. "You told me clients don't want to see someone who shops at thrift stores. Vogue seemed happy enough to photograph me. I was trying to protect you from rejection. You were protecting yourself from competition. You recognized that my designs were better than anything you could create, and you decided to take credit rather than share it. That's not. I have the sketches, Veronica. I have the timeline. I have 4 years of documentation showing exactly who designed what. Your version of events doesn't survive scrutiny." The call ended without resolution. Most confrontations with exploiters end that way. They can't acknowledge what they've done without dismantling their self-image. The industry changed, slowly, in response to stories like mine. Fashion schools started including contracts and credit protection in their business curricula. Industry organizations developed guidelines about creative attribution. Young designers learned to document their work obsessively, protecting themselves from the exploitation that had nearly erased me. I spoke at conferences about my experience, not as a victim narrative, but as a warning and a guide. How to recognize exploitation early. How to document your creative work. How to value yourself when employers try to convince you you're not presentable, not suitable, not worthy of credit. Talented but not presentable. The phrase became a touchstone for discussions about classism and appearance bias in creative industries. If someone's work was good enough to sell, wasn't the person behind it good enough to acknowledge? My design studio now occupies the building where Veronica's showroom used to be. The irony wasn't intentional. The space became available after her business collapsed, and the location was perfect for my needs. But walking through rooms where I once hid behind velvet curtains, now filled with my team and my work and my name on the door, carries a particular satisfaction. The backroom where I spent 2 years invisible has been converted into a collaborative workspace. No curtains, no hiding, no hierarchy based on appearance rather than ability. Every employee is credited for their contributions. Every creative input is documented and acknowledged. Every person who walks through the door, regardless of their wardrobe, is treated as someone whose presence enhances rather than undermines the brand. The thrift store clothes still hang in my closet. Not because I see and afford better, my line has been profitable for 3 years, but because those clothes represent something important. They represent years of creativity developed despite limited resources. They represent refusing to believe that financial background determines creative worth. When magazines photograph me now, I sometimes wear vintage pieces from those years. Not as costume, but as reminder. Clients don't want to see someone who shops at thrift stores. Those clients were wrong. Or rather, Veronica was wrong about what clients wanted. They wanted good design, not designer wardrobes on the people creating it. The Vogue photographer who first noticed me has become a friend. We've worked together on multiple shoots since that first explosive interview. She's photographed my collections, my studio, my journey from backroom invisibility to industry recognition. I almost didn't approach you at that exhibition, she admitted once. You seemed so absorbed in the textiles. I thought you wouldn't want to be interrupted. I wouldn't have wanted to be interrupted. That was the first time in months I'd let myself engage publicly with fashion. Veronica had convinced me I needed to stay hidden. But you were so clearly passionate. So obviously knowledgeable. When I researched your background later, everything made sense, the sketches matching the Laurent collection, the invisible talent behind the visible brand. You saw what she refused to see. I saw what she deliberately ignored. There's a difference. She knew exactly who you were. She just chose to pretend otherwise. The question I'm asked most frequently, was it worth it? 2 years of exploitation. 2 years of hearing I wasn't presentable. 2 years of watching someone else take credit for my life's work. The honest answer is complicated. Those years taught me what I would never accept again. They taught me the value of documentation, of contracts, of protecting my creative work legally and professionally. They taught me that some people will exploit talent rather than nurture it, and that recognizing the difference early is essential. Would I have learned those lessons without the pain? Maybe. But probably not as deeply. The better question is, would I choose it again? And the answer is no. Given the choice, I'd have walked away from Veronica's offer, found another path, built my career without the trauma of erasure. No lesson is worth 2 years of being told you're not good enough to be seen. But I wasn't given that choice with full information. I was given a desperate opportunity that concealed exploitation beneath promises of advancement. Now I have different choices. Better choices. Choices I make with my eyes open and my name on my own work. She told me I wasn't presentable. She told me to stay in the backroom where clients couldn't see someone who shopped at thrift stores. For 2 years, my designs carried her name while I remained invisible behind velvet curtains. Then Vogue called, looking for the genius behind the collection. They'd done their research. They'd traced my sketches, documented my techniques, connected my student work to every piece she claimed as her own. When the photographer pointed at me and said, "There she is," my boss dropped her champagne glass, because her entire reputation was about to shatter alongside it. She'd built her brand on my invisibility. Vogue built their story on exposing it. Now my name is on my own work, my face is in the magazines, and her showroom is my design studio. Talented but not presentable? I'm presenting just fine.